Welcome to Next Economy Now. The goal of this podcast series is to highlight the leaders who are taking a regenerative, bioregional, equitable, democratic, racially just, and whole systems approach to creating the new economy. I'm Ryan Honeyman, a partner at Lift Economy. My guest today is Jakada Imani. Jakada is the CEO of the Management Center, a nonprofit capacity building organization based in Washington, D.C. He is a coach and trainer with more than 30 years experience working in racial, social, and economic justice movements. Jakada is also the co-author of the new book, Management in a Changing World: How to Manage for Equity, Sustainability, and Results from Wiley Publishers. Jakada, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. Good to see you, Ryan.
I guess I should say welcome back. This is the second time around. Just for folks listening, if you want to get into sort of a broad-based introduction to the Management Center and some of Jakada's background and how he got to where he is today, I'd suggest listening to that episode. And today we're going to be focusing more on the new book and some of the management philosophy. And I also have some common challenges organizations are facing. I'm just curious for your thoughts on some of these, because it's probably patterns you've seen in your work. And so maybe, I guess, for folks who haven't listened to the past episode, just generally, what is the Management Center, so we can sort of get that framing for folks before we jump in.
Yeah. The Management Center helps social justice leaders build and run equitable, sustainable, and results-driven organizations. We've been around for about 17 years. We have a website, managementcenter.org, where we have literally hundreds of tools and articles about how to do feedback well, how to write a good job description, how to interview well. And then we do training of about 17,000 people a year. We train managers all over the country on nuts and bolts of effective management, both deep dives with organizations and individual managers just signing up to do their own professional development. And then we coach deeply with about 150 organizations a year. We're working with senior leaders, their senior leadership teams, new managers to help them push through big problems or pursue really large opportunities, whether it's growing their organization to be multi-state or it is figuring out how to launch a new strategy, or figuring out how to build new teams, or thinking about how to get the founder and CEO more external by bringing in somebody to really manage day to day. So we go deep with organizations as well.
Fantastic. And I think you would agree that the Management Center's clients and focus is on progressive social justice focused organizations, right? Is that a fair assessment?
Predominantly. So all of our organizations are social justice organizations. About 75% of them work in community policy change, communications, economic development, economic empowerment. And then about 25% of them do school equity, where they are really thinking about how to close the achievement gap. And so it's school administrators, senior district leaders, folks who are running charter management school systems, and funders. So yeah, all folks who are focused in on social justice.
Awesome. So the new book, Management in a Changing World, can you describe what the new book is, why you wrote it, who's it for? Just give me sort of some information about the new book you guys have just published.
Yeah. So we've had a book for a number of years, probably 10 or 12 years. We had the predecessor, Managing to Change the World, which is the same name of the main training that we run for managers. And this new book, what it does is it's a how-to, very sort of like, here is how you give feedback. Here is how you run an interview process and a hiring. Here's how you set goals. But what it does that the old book didn't do is it centers equity and sustainability. Those were sort of literally sidebars in the past. Now they are whole threads that are deeply woven into our approach. And so we are helping managers think through some of the most common, consistent challenges and opportunities that managers have to work through, and how to do that from a value-centered approach, like how to center equity, sustainability, and results within that. And in this book, there is a whole chapter on relationship building, because we understand now more than ever that you have to manage the level of a relationship. And so how do you build a really good, dynamic, based on integrity relationship with the people that you manage or who manage you? And so that's what's in the book. And we've had some great responses from folks saying that they really get it. One of a friend and a mentor who I worked with at the Ella Baker Center, when I started 25 years ago, wrote me and said she had the first book. taken our training years ago, and there was something in this book that helped her rethink how she does going to do hiring going forward, which was just like the nicest thing ever to hear somebody who, I looked up to and who taught me stuff about being an effective organizer looked at this book and found something that they thought was useful.
Yeah, and I really appreciate the focus on equity and sustainability because it seems like in a lot of your online trainings and materials that has been reflected in the past 5 to 10 years. And then the book was sitting there, but now it's sort of updated. And yeah, I'm curious, like, what stood out to you while updating the new version? Are there any stories of like a particular insight or some of the aha moments that came to you through writing it?
Yeah, the world has changed a lot in the last 10 years. And I think one of the things that we were really pushing for in this book was the initial book, given who folks were when they wrote it, it centered whiteness. And when it talked about equity, it talked about how do you do equity as a white person working with people of color, or as a man working with people who identify as a man, or as a US citizen identify, right? And for many of our clients, that's not the situation they find themselves in. There's a women-founded organization led by women of color, founded by women of color. And so the contradictions in there aren't, are you a person of color? The contradictions in the folks who are at the center of that organization or in the mainstream, or the folks who are on the margins of those organizations are going to be women of color. It's just going to be that maybe they went to college or didn't go to college. They are first generation immigrant or not, right? And so when you think about equity in those, like who has authority and say, how do you manage across lines of difference when the lines of difference aren't just sort of like classic textbook white man managing someone not white man, it left people cold. They couldn't see them ways. How do you apply this? And so we dug in there, and in a way that now, no matter what those sort of fault lines and how you're thinking it, or what your equity challenges are, you can find your way in that book and see like, okay, here's a perspective of how I might tackle it. The other thing is we got much clearer about what are the values that we're rooting this in? What is the sort of broader and deeper and foundational ethos for us in management? And have gotten much more articulate about like, I know a hammer is for building things, but you can also hit somebody upside the head with a hammer, right? And so we wanted to share with people that there are good ways and values aligned ways to use these tools. And then there are ways that you can use these tools where actually you're not doing what we are teaching you to do. This is actually decreasing equity as you apply these tools in these ways. And so it matters how you apply the tool. And so what we did is we started with management mindsets and approaches, where we started out very clearly just naming that there are multiple traditions of management in this country. The most popular one that you're going to learn if you go and get an MBA or go to business school is going to be one that's actually rooted in slavery. It really is rooted in slavery. It's rooted on hyper exploitation of workers so that you can maximize profits. And you can't really just plug and play that in an organization that is designed to actually undermine those exact dynamics, to actually say, we don't believe in a racial hierarchy of capital, and we're not going to reapply that here. And so it says we believe in not a command and control approach to management, but a conspire and align approach to management, where we are working together towards a common vision. We understand what that vision is. We understand what those objectives are that we're working towards, and we understand what roles we have to play in them. It doesn't mean that there are not differentiations of power. Like all of a sudden somebody who's the CEO is not the CEO. That somebody who is a program director is not a program director. That somebody who really can hire and fire other people pretends that they can't. That's not what this is about. But it is about the principled, thoughtful, conscious exercise of that authority and power in alignment with where the organization is trying to go. And so that I feel like is a breakthrough. And then folks have said that it's been profoundly helpful for them to be able to think about their management, root their management in a set of values like that.
I really like this, like conspire and align. What's an example of like how a company might do that and like what they do?
Yeah. So I'll give you a couple of examples. Just think of a few from TMC and other places I've worked. So I was coaching with an organization some years ago who really was working on getting clear. It was sort of a startup doing really big, ambitious mission about transforming the criminal justice system and its impact on women in the system and beyond. And they got hyper clear on what their vision was and where they were going. And a few of the other folks who were senior leaders in the organization actually came and said, I can keep doing this job. Now that I'm sure where we're going, I can keep doing this job for maybe 6 months or a year more. And then we actually need somebody who has a set of skills and a commitment and a set of talent and interest in growing this thing to achieve that mission in a way that I actually know that I can't. Now I see, the path isn't clear, but I see the sort of altitude we're angling for. I see where and I just want to be honest with you. Not in a sort of, I'm not on board. Like, no. I would love to find another seat on the bus because I want to go where you're going. I just get that, like, what the person who needs to have this role needs to ultimately do is not something that I have the passion, acumen, right, and ability to sort of grow into. And that executive director could have gone and had to, in 6 months or 2 years, have that conversation because they were clear. Right. And that would have been funky and weird. Like, but I helped build this place and now you're just going to kick me as opposed to that person having clarity about, like, oh, I get where we're going. I get what my contribution can be, and it can be huge, but not in this role. In this role, you actually need somebody who can do stuff that I can't do. Flip side, I've worked with people, and I get to work with people at TMC who come to me with proposals and plans about our vision and where we're going, what they've crafted with their teams that are far beyond anything that I could have come up with. Now, I think I'm clever, cute, funny, smart, all that good stuff. I'm humble, but I got something with me. I think I can change the world. So, but no one of us is smarter than all of us. And what these folks come up with in terms of adult learning, in terms of how to craft even the language in this book, which Mona Wong, my co-author, spent countless hours thinking through how to tell these stories, how to term these phrases so that we called forward learnings in ways that people could translate them into actions. I contributed a lot, yes. And what Mona and Bex and I were able to do together, no one of us would have been able to do that. Like, it just wasn't going to happen, right?
That's awesome. Yeah. And having written a book with other co-authors as well, I do know that, like, that extra value and insight into the storytelling can really help expand. I mean, it's honestly, you're conspiring and aligning even on writing this book in a way, instead of like, this is my vision, we're going to do this.
That's right.
I want to bring some issues that I feel like a lot of progressive orgs are facing. And I wanted to get your take on, from a management center perspective, how you might address them. One is seemingly pedantic or not revolutionary, but I think it does affect a lot of people, is internal meetings. Just like the amount of internal meetings that just take up time that are not super productive. So some people love internal meetings, some people hate them. And I'm curious, what is your take on internal meetings? Like, how do you balance that at TMC? And then how do you see your clients balance them? And do you have thoughts on, like, asynchronous work versus team meetings? Or, just kind of curious for your general take on it.
So, one, I love digging into the practical because managers have to have a theoretical and philosophical underpinning because we want to be adding up to something. But it lives in the practice. This is not like, being a manager is much more like playing a saxophone than it is like being a physicist. It just lives in the practice. So first, every meeting has to have a pop. And a pop is purpose, outcome, process. What's the purpose of this meeting? Why are we all coming together? What is the process we're going to engage in through the course of this meeting? What is the purpose of this meeting? What is the outcomes we're looking for? So what are we looking for as the outcome of this meeting? And then what is the process, and how's that process going to get us to these outcomes? And so when that happens, meetings either get shorter or they don't happen. Second is, in every meeting, I learned this from Bex Ahuja, my co-author on this book. They used to say, because we get this in training all the time, Bex's rule is 100. 100% of the agenda is relevant to 100% of the attendees. So
that's so revolutionary right now, man. It's like, my mind is.
If 100% of then I'm in the wrong meeting. Lastly, I often ask people, does this need to be a meeting or can it be an email? Like, can this just literally be an email?
A 1-minute email? Do you have something on that?
I don't quote Abraham Lincoln often, but my only Abraham Lincoln quote that is attributed to him, might not be him, is, I sat down to write you a short letter. Having not the time, I wrote you a long one. So, but here's the thing. I'm often, and if we were working together, I would want to talk to you and your team and get under. Like, are there disagreements, confusion? Is there an underlying power struggle about decision making that is leading to these meetings where people are like, I know that we said we're not going to do this, or I know that we said we're going to do this, or I know, but can we just rehash it one more time? Can we just, if we all get in a room, can I litigate this one more time and get like, and somehow I can get the jury, right? This time it's just like, and so that's what I would want to try to get at. Cause I think oftentimes when that's happening, it's like, oh, this person is like literally trying to move this thing that's been decided. They just either they felt wronged or unheard or they don't agree. And then let's talk about that. Let's talk about that, right? Like how decisions get made. That like now that you want to have a meeting about it as opposed to, again, what's the pop, right? Because that would help clear, oh, well, this is not the place for this meeting. This is, or you shouldn't even be in this meeting. No harm, no foul, but like you don't, this 100% of the agenda is about the 100% of the participants. This is not in your workflow. So therefore that meeting actually happened and you weren't there. That's what happened. Because this has nothing to do with your work. Now we can have a conversation about why you think, and maybe you're right that you should, this touches your work or something like that. But that is where the manager has to get curious, lean in, see what's under the thing. Yeah, I could go all day. So I'll stop there.
This is what I want, though. It's like the nitty gritty. I'm going to be rolling into meetings and be like, what's the pop? 100, 100. Like, I'm going to be yelling out commands.
Not command and control.
No.
Command and control.
You know, it seems to me with meeting, this is just particularly up for me right now because I'm just realizing if you have an agenda that's pre-populated, then I can go in and like write my answers to the agenda before the meeting. And then like, we don't have to have a meeting. But I think for some reason, asynchronous. So now let's talk about asynchronous. Like, what are your thoughts on that? And like, do you feel like asking everyone to be asynchronous is actually not realistic? And it's like, you know, goes against the preference, traditions, requirements part of TMC. I'm just kind of curious for your thoughts.
This is good. So I would say I'm diagnosing right here live, Ryan. So when managers and leaders come to me with this, what I find is I'm always curious about their one-on-ones with their staff people, with the people who report to them or they work with, right? Like how often are those one-on-ones, who populates the agenda, how it works. Because what I have found is, and when I was leading at the Ella Baker Center, we would have these staff meetings or team meetings that were right before lunch. And so then I'd be trying to like run to the restroom and then run out and get lunch before I had my afternoon meetings. And people would just be standing in the hall trying to like, can I get 5 minutes? And then so what I did was started making regular check-ins with all of my people. And the thing I didn't do, which I would do now, is they would write the agenda and then 10 minutes before, and at least 20 minutes, sometimes an hour, and sometimes now weeks before, I would go and write the things I wanted to share or write updates. And so what the Management Center teaches now is that in every check-in, at the top of the check-in agenda, there are these sections for updates. That is just like, I wanted to let you know this thing happened. We talked about this thing. I haven't gotten back to it yet, but I'm going to get to it then. Then there's items for discussion, what we're going to dig in. Then there is things that I want you to know that I'm thinking about, but they're on the back burner. And then there's a place for you as my manager to put your agenda items. And then there's literally at the bottom, feedback. Thing I did well this week, thing I could do better, thing you did well this week as my manager, a thing you could have done better. A space for you to write what you've done well this week and what you could have done better, and one thing I've done well or multiple or could have done better. So we bake in feedback as like and sometimes people, we just acknowledge it. Like, thank you for this feedback, super helpful. Sometimes we don't have time to get to it, but the person reads it. And so it means that most of my meeting with folks I work with is not spent in update because it's written out. But then two, the things they really need actually right before I came to this meeting, came to this call with you, I was in a meeting with our team who leads our culture section of our organization, which is our staff meetings, our staff gatherings are all under the culture heading. And we were just thinking through 2024. And one of the amazing things about working with them is they have a ton of questions for me about what are, and some of them we just literally dealt with over Slack asynchronous. We were not, this person lives on the East Coast. They put bunch of questions for me at 7 a.m. my time over the course of my day. I answer those questions as I can get to them. There was literally like 15 of them. I answer them in Slack back. And then today, instead of having an hour and a half meeting about scheduling 2024, we literally had 30 minutes that were just the stuff we could not do. Yes, no, maybe, yes, no, maybe, or there were places where I could just say, well, I actually want your thinking about this, or I want to talk this through because I don't know. I'm thinking a lot about this next year. I want us to reflect together about like, how are we holding the culture this year and what's worked and what hasn't. And so I don't want to project too much into the future until we've had that discussion. And then she could both understand and get the things that she needed right now, as well as then she could see, oh, okay, he can't just give me a yes or no about that because he wants to talk more about it and needs more context or wants to share more context. And so I think we're never going to be in this thing where we're all, well, unless you live with that person or your conjoined twin, we're never going to all be together all the time. And even then, that person, I think, is going to sleep when you're awake and vice versa. But nonetheless, we're never going to all be in the same place at the same time anymore. It's always going to be a little bit of, and so then what is that either synchronous time where we're all together in a meeting? What is the highest, best good of that? What can we get done in other places where we don't all have to be like, this could be email, this could be dealt with over Slack, this could be a shared document where we just working back and forth, but this is actually something where we have to talk it all through. And so that is how we handle it. And I will be honest, I'll be 51 next month. And I had some bad experiences with Slack. I worked in organizations where there's Slack abuse happening. And people were using it for all kind of stuff that I was like, and so when my team was like, can we get on Slack? I was like, back in March. And so I was like, you licked a stamp and you put it on an envelope. And I had to wait a week to get it. No. Okay. So, but having also, it's funny, but I think we have to have organizational clarity about lines of communication. What is email for? What is Slack for? What are meetings for? I wish we all knew this, but we don't.
Do you have that at TMC? Like, do you have like, this is what email is for? This is what Slack is for?
We do.
Can you share that with?
I can't share it with you, but I can tell you. I can tell you that we have, and they're living. It's not one and done. Everything is a living document, but we have clarity and they're contextual. So and relational. So there are managers who say, if you need something urgent from me, text me. And there are staff people who say the same thing. There's other folks who say, if there's something you want to share with me, drop me a voicemail. There's other people who say, like, if you send me a voicemail, I think you want to fight because like you left a recorded message on my phone. why would you disrespect me in that? What have I done to you? Right? So communications is actually cultural and individual. But we have as a team, there are Slack threads that are, you have to read this at least once a day when you're working. There are Slack threads that are like, if you never look at this, no one cares. No one cares. There are emails that have headings, that action item attached, right? That FYI in the heading. So you can just bucket it. Because what happens is email is free, ostensibly. It turns out your service provider will charge you at some point. But and so people just send them and they CC all kinds of people who don't need to see it. And folks will not. I'm of this age, again, I told you, where if something really happens important, I pick up the phone and call people. Other people are like, they see their phone ringing and it's me. They're like, is he finna fire me? But that's not what it's important. And I want to talk with you because I want you to hear the tone and inflection in my voice as we share this thing that is important, that will not come across the same way via text or via email. And that's actually something I've worked with clients on, particularly campaigning clients, is, hey, sensitive, important things we don't discuss over text or email. We arrange time to talk about it on those places, but then we talk because we're tired, we're cranky, we are misprone. Like I can't actually, your LOL wasn't LOLing. And I was offended. And if we were in Zoom or we were on a phone call, you would have picked up on that. But over text message, my one word response, you thought I was just busy, but actually I'm mad and we need to talk about it. And so having those sort of like level of agreement and or even just clear sort of rules of the road are profoundly helpful in organizations. And it turns out that's where like when I started working, I got literally a paper phone pad of like that was like I could tear it off and then there was 2 more copies underneath it. Right?
The triplicates?
Yes, in triplicate, because it might get lost. And I had to tell somebody like, no, I took that note and I asked for the date and I left it on your desk. And a mail logbook for when the mail would come into our office. And that was it. And now we have like so many lines of communication with each other, and people use them differently and have different expectations around them. So organizations now, I think, have to take those things, because that's how a lot of communication is going to happen. And I think we're missing each other a lot.
Yeah, I think that's one of the challenges that we've had at our own company, and I've seen with others, is just internal company communication is not being super effective because you've got GChat tagging people on a Google document. You've got Asana. Do you use Asana or one of those type of things for?
Praise God, no, we don't use Asana, but I have used Asana. Yeah. I mean, they're all good tools, but I'm going to tell you this. This is what I actually tell my team, because we're working hard to figure out, because we've been online since the pandemic, and we're not going to go offline. The training is some aspect of training is going to stay online. And so we're trying to figure out, how do we leverage tools? The thing I keep saying to people, and I believe it, management is high touch, aided by high tech. Tools are important, but it's high touch. It's relational. It is like, we have to know each other. And so we have to get explicit about these things, or we're going to miss each other a lot. We're just going to miss each other a lot.
Thing I'd love to get your thoughts on that I think is a lot of companies is with conflict. And so I think it's actually more familiar, like how to deal with a toxic behavior or this sort of like generally perceived bad behavior. I think actually has more awareness and resources pointed towards it. But it seems like there's more of a challenge in like actively encouraging healthy conflict, like regular tension processing or feedback between members. I'm curious, how do you, maybe you address it in the book, or maybe Management Center has resources, but how do you kind of think about the healthy conflict, or like the ways to get tensions processed so it doesn't lead to that negative?
Yeah. So in the book, in relationship building, we talk a little bit about it. In how to give and receive feedback, we talk a little bit about it, but there isn't really a chapter on conflict, but it is something that we work a lot with our clients on and think some about. And I want to be honest, I think that there are not we don't have great resources. Like, there's not great resources. And it is a site of struggle for many of our clients. So there's a part of it we can help with, and I have great ideas about, and then there's parts of it where I'm like, So they're organizational and they're cultural. And so I'll share with you what I did when I became CEO with the Management Center. I went back to our values and I said, here are our values. And I started engaging the team, first my senior leadership team, my managers, and then eventually the entire staff, in how do we translate these values into a set of community agreements about how we will behave with each other, and that we can hold ourselves and each other accountable for engaging in these ways. So we came up with a set of actual values that say how we engage with each other. And then I took it to the next step and I said, okay, so now that we have these community agreements that are rooted in our values, which are rooted in our mission, how do you, as a staff person here, want to engage in repair when you have created harm? When you've been the person who has done something regrettable, how do you want to initiate repair? And everybody started down well, here's how people need to talk to me after. I said, no, that's not what I asked. That's not, no, come back. We are all going to say and do things that each other finds objectionable. You're going to say and do things that I, as the CEO, older than you, whatever, that are going to I find objectionable. You're going to say something that was racist, you didn't mean to be racist. You're going to say something that was ageist, you didn't mean to be ageist. You're going to say something that is classist, you didn't mean to be classist. How do you want me to bring you back in the right relationship with me when that has happened? What is which shifted the conversation, right? In a culture, in our organization, we're all going to do things, and the more comfortable we get with each other, the more we're going to point out, hey, Ryan, that thing you said didn't land right for me. right? That's actually a sign of effective organizational culture, is that people feel like they can say that wasn't comfortable because that is the path to comfort, and they are comfortable enough to say that wasn't comfortable. So the way that we have to deal with conflict is, one, we have to acknowledge early there is going to be conflict inside this organization because we're humans engaged in a human endeavor. And surprise, surprise, we have differences of opinions. We say things that hurt each other's feelings. We say things that are insensitive because we did not know, right? And so how do we engage in conflict in a way that is principled, that is about deeper alignment, more commitment, more connection, more focus? And setting that expectation around conflict, for lots of people, transform it, because then they're not fighting to win. They're fighting to be clearer. They're fighting to be connected. They're fighting to be better. And we can fight the issues and not each other, right? Now, I want to acknowledge and I want to name a few different things because it is complicated and it's hard to sometimes know the difference. Most of us know how to fight with enemies. We know how to fight with people who it's a life or death struggle. They are bad or not seeing our humanity or believing. We don't know how to engage in principle struggle with people who we are connected and committed to. And so then we fight with people who we are connected and committed to as if they're enemies. That's not going to work, because with our enemies, we want them to just roll up and go away, just leave the field. But how do we shift it to, how do we have heated discussions as a team who then very next play, I need you to have my back and I need to have yours, right? That's a different thing. And everybody isn't up for it. Some people actually aren't principled. They've behaved in ways that are unprincipled and not willing to take accountability. And they're going to use their gender privilege, racial privilege, class privilege, positional privilege to not take responsibility and not engage principally. Well, then those people, there's no principle discussions you can have with those folks about that. But that is not everybody. And that is not always what's happening. And so setting up some rules of the road, talking about how you engage in a principled struggle inside your organization before you're in the middle of it, but early on, acknowledging that it's a common, this happens in organizations. People disagree. It gets heated. We're passionate. We're committed, right? And how are we going to depersonalize it? How are we going to sort of make the issue the enemy and not the people, right? And then continuing, like I said, within TMC, those are all learning practices. We don't get it right every time. We get it wrong a lot. And we then have to debrief it and say, okay, what worked well there and what didn't, right? Like, what's happening there that, like, this didn't feel right. Let's talk about it. What could we have done differently? Oh, I could have done this differently. Okay, cool. Noted. I took the note. No, right? So I think that isn't happening. Last thing I'll say about it, inside of organizations, when George Floyd was murdered, organizations that had not taken equity seriously begin to take equity seriously. So for many organizations and many of your listeners, that will be part of the beginning of their equity journey or a public commitment to it. For me as a Black person, that's a double-edged sword. I have thankful that we had this quote unquote moment of racial reckoning. And I've been talking about this shit. I've been clear. This ain't new to me. That's not the site, right? So there is ways that even beginning to talk about equity or to talk about inclusion or talk about justice without acknowledging that there are people within your organization, within your sector, who have been having this conversation, who have been pushing for some of these things, sometimes can elicit a lot of conflict. And people are like, but I'm doing the right thing. And it's like, snapshot, like just run the tape back though. I have found that when there is an acknowledgement of those things, those conversations and that work tends to happen better. Because there is like okay, now we're in we're having the same conversation. Okay, now I can like take you at your word, start to hear you out because you've gone back and acknowledged, I didn't get it before, but I get it now, as opposed to I get it. It's like, well, do you get it? Okay. I've seen this play out in many different organizations as a side of struggle. The last place, and then let's go to your next question. And I did a little bit of this, and I'm just going to name it here earlier in one of your examples, is we teach managers to think about the iceberg. Like oftentimes when you're looking at a conflict, it's the tip of the iceberg. There's a bunch of stuff under that conflict or under that disagreement. And so as managers, we want to be trying to see below the surface, get folks talking about what's happening under, and because then we can get to it. We can actually get to the root of the thing and be talking about it in ways that are much more helpful, because sometimes people will only give us a tip of the iceberg because they feel like we're not there for all of it, really, 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 or they've tried and we just missed it as leaders. And so they're just going to talk about the tip of the iceberg. But when you're talking about the tip of an iceberg, people are saying stuff that doesn't really, it's like, well, wait, that isn't, right? And so then it creates, the conflict gets deeper and deeper and deeper because they're talking about things that are deeper. And so then the surface level interventions we're trying to make don't touch the stuff down low, which is really the stuff they're holding on to.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember in the iceberg, equity and identity is one of those deeper pieces that most people are not seeing. They're seeing, oh, XYZ behavior. But I think that's why I appreciate management center stuff. And I said this in our first interview, but being a personal super user of all your documents and really just appreciating that perspective that you bring, because it's sorely needed. I'm curious, as you sort of move forward, thinking about 2024, thinking about next steps for this book, what are you most excited about? Like, what do you kind of see on the horizon for some of the work you all are doing?
Well, I think I took this role to do sort of three things. It's always three things with me, is to preserve what makes us uniquely helpful to clients. So this thing that you're saying about folks who've been doing this for years, like yourself, like Joe, who I talked about earlier, find us useful because we're so practical. One of the things as we were writing the book, people were like, are you really going to talk? Are you really trying to convince people? How do you convince people of equity? And I was like, that's not our job. I'm not here for it. I'm not talking to those people who don't, I'm talking to people who are like, no. I'm trying to implement how, right? And so it's like, get to the how. So I'm preserving what makes us uniquely helpful to clients. And then we're adapting to the current nature of work. When we started this, folks were mostly together in place. Everyone's in a city, a state, right? All working together. And then boom, people are all over the country. People don't see each other for months at a time in the flesh. They're still having to manage and get stuff done. And so how do our tools fit that context and fit the way people learn in that context, where we're not saying, hey, come to San Francisco for 2 days and be in this. The women's building is beautiful where I trained, but like, come be in this stuffy building with the windows and the fans, and give us 2 full days and pay to put your staff person up in a hotel in the most expensive city in the country during the most expensive time of year so we can train you. We're not doing that anymore. We will do that for folks who really want it and really can't learn other ways, or their team will all be together. So we're moving online in a way that is not just now good, but we're trying to how do we get great at teaching and training online? And then lastly, we have to grow. There are too many people doing too much important work. And there are folks who, if we could have been with them, or they could have been thinking about Conspiring Online approach to managers, implementing those sorts of tools, approaches, building in that way, they would be so much more impactful than like managing through the level of conflict and harm and hurt feelings, and like the entire team is burned out and brittle and don't want to do it. No, we're helpful in those contexts. We are much more helpful when you're like, we just got $50 million and we're going to get into 5 states. We just opened an office in 4 more counties and we're going 8 more next year. Can we talk? Like, we're so much more helpful there, helping people dream and scheme and get big and go hard, than we are in the cleanup crew. We're good in a cleanup too. And so we want people to find us before, in the early stages of their work. That's why I'm back on your podcast. That's why we wrote this book and we're putting it out. That's why we're not just talking about our amazing tools, but we're talking about the deeper approach to management, this notion of conspire and align, and trying to get that into as an earworm in as many people as possible, so that they're like, I want to pursue an aspire and align approach to managers. I want to be conspiring and aligning with my folks. I want to be in the huddle, talking about where we're going, helping divide up the plays, talking about who's running and what and responsible for what, so we can get better, more equitable, sustainable results over time, because that's what we think it's going to take to actually shift the needle on all the things we care about. Like, I'm committed to something about climate change. It's not happening yet. Everything is happening. It's nowhere near enough. We know it. It's nowhere near enough. And so our organizations that are working on this have to get better. And me coaching individual leaders is going to be good, but not as great as those leaders being able to pick up our book, and those leaders having grown up in organizations that are well run and they have the scaffolding now to implement those sorts of things. And so that is where I'm pushing. That is my TMC has been very behind the scenes, very nuts and bolts. If you know us, you know, and you're lucky. But we want to be like, I'm tired of hearing about those guys at TMC. Let me go over there and take a training. Let me get this book so I can see if the hype is real. And then I've worked lots of places that have done many great things. I talk to my staff all the time about TMC. I talk to our team again and again and again. What we do matters because it helps managers and leaders of organizations be better with their people as they deliver more. That they are like building up and investing in their people as they're winning more. And that means that our people who are winning are more filled up to keep winning and delivering, and not just like, yeah, I won, but I'm never working in that field again. Or yeah, we came close, but man, I'll never do another campaign. Or yeah, it was cool, but these mission-driven organizations, man, they just use you up and spit you out. Like, I don't want to hear that. I don't want our movements filled with people who have, or our movement leaking people who are leaving with that sort of experience. I want people who are like, I'm blessed enough to have grown up in the Bay, and I got to meet people who went on the freedom rides, who went to Mississippi Freedom Summer and registered voters and did this incredible work. Those are some of my OGs that I just got to hang out with, who were in their 60s and 70s when I was meeting them as a young person. And the inspiration they provided me about like what it was to be on the ground doing this work that I was learning about in history books, right? That is like, and they were still jazzed and hopeful. Right? They had gone through Reagan, but they were still jazzed and hopeful because of those formative experiences. And so what I'm excited about is for TMC to be like the Highlander Center, where a lot of those people learn to do nonviolent direct action, for where managers and the movements we work with learn how to be effective managers in ways that the folks who come after us can tell the stories of like, Ryan was my manager and I learned so much, and here's what I learned, here's what I did, and here's what I've been able to do. And I got good at this and clear on that and and share that with other people so that we're building the army of love that it's going to take to transform this country and indeed the world. So that's what I'm excited about over the next period. And that's my vision.
Well, maybe could you give folks, where can they get the book, website and socials, any of that good stuff for folks to follow up?
For sure. So managementcenter.org, all one word. We have a tab that says book. You can get it from your local bookseller, or you can order it online, and you can sign up there for our trainings. You can get our newsletter. You can download our tools. You can look for a coach. And then Management Center on LinkedIn. We're really on LinkedIn because, the socials are fun, and I like to share other people's puppy pictures more than my own because I'm not a pet person. But we're there, and I am on LinkedIn as well. Jakada Imani on LinkedIn. And that's the place to sort of stay in conversation and communication with us about and learn some of the things we're working on and moving through.
Awesome. Jakada, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much. And yeah, folks should go check out the book. I'm particularly excited that you have an audiobook version. That's just my learning style. I'll be reading it, and yeah, excited to see what you're up to in the future.
Oh, well, I can't wait to hear what you think of the audiobook. That's the one thing I have not downloaded, the audiobook, which I should do. It's recorded by this woman who actually lives in the Bay. So I'm excited about that. We picked her. Other people picked her. I didn't, but she apparently is really good. So I'm excited to hear it and see what you think.
Awesome. Thanks again.
Thanks for having me again.
All right. Next Economy Now is a production of Lift Economy. To listen to all of our episodes, go to lifteconomy.com/podcast. That's LIFT economy.com/podcast. You can also sign up for our monthly newsletter at lifteconomy.com/newsletter. Please also rate and review our podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for tuning in to today's episode. Before you go, we wanted to let you know that our spring cohort of the Next Economy MBA begins on March 26th. If you're an entrepreneur seeking to create a business that works for all life, a member of a team looking to transition your organization into one that is more regenerative and democratic, or someone who's considering a career or livelihood transition and embodiment with your values, we designed this course for you. Over this 9-month learning journey, you'll have the chance to learn practical skills around business and life design based on our work with over 250 social enterprises. In addition to live sessions, you can deepen your experience and practice with special sessions, affinity groups, and connections with over 500 alumni who have participated in the course. Interested in learning more? Visit lifteconomy.com/MBA to view our course curriculum and sign up for a free intro with one of our facilitators. If you're ready to sign up, you can use the code PODCASTMBA to save 10% on tuition. We hope you'll join us.